The rain fell in relentless sheets, hammering the windshield of Anton Greaves' truck as he navigated the winding mountain road. The headlights barely cut through the dense fog rolling down from the cliffs, swallowing the asphalt ahead. He had driven this route dozens of times, but tonight, the looming shadow of Tunnel Number 6 sent an unshakable chill through his spine. The tunnel had a reputation, one whispered among truckers, spoken in hushed voices over cheap coffee at roadside diners. There were stories of shadows flitting along the edges of vision, whispers curling through static-filled radios, and most chilling of all, drivers who vanished without a trace. Anton never put much stock in ghost stories. Superstitions were for the weak, he told himself. But when he reached the mouth of the tunnel, something primal in him recoiled. The entrance yawned like a hungry maw, its insides swallowed by darkness. Halfway through, his radio crackled. A burst of static, then a voice, low, guttural, and unmistakably human. "Help us." Anton's breath hitched. His fingers tightened around the wheel. He swallowed hard and kept driving. Just his imagination, he thought. But then, a dull thud against the passenger side window. His stomach twisted. He turned his head, expecting rain. Instead, a pale hand pressed against the glass, its fingers splayed, skin mottled with bruises. Eyes, dark and bottomless, stared at him from the other side. Anton slammed the brakes. The truck skidded, tires screeching. He turned sharply, heart hammering, but the tunnel was empty. No figure. No handprint. Just cold, suffocating silence. His breathing ragged, he reached for his phone. No signal. Of course not. He exhaled sharply, forcing himself to calm down. Just fatigue. Just the darkness playing tricks. Then he heard it, the rhythmic tapping against the back of the cab. Slow. Deliberate. Tap, tap, tap. Anton turned on the interior light and peered through the rear window. The cargo hold was locked. Secure. But the sound continued, closer now, echoing like nails raking across wood. Tap, tap, tap. A scream built in his throat, but before he could react, the truck's engine sputtered and died. And the lights went out. Anton's breath came in ragged gasps as the darkness swallowed him whole. He fumbled for the ignition, turning the key with trembling hands. Nothing. The engine refused to start. The silence inside the cab felt suffocating, pressing in on him like unseen hands. Then, from outside the truck, the sound of footsteps. Soft at first. Slow. Bare feet slapping against the wet asphalt. Anton clenched his jaw. This wasn't real. It couldn't be real. The footsteps grew louder, circling the truck. His pulse pounded in his ears. He reached for the glove compartment, yanking it open. A flashlight. His fingers wrapped around it like a lifeline. With a sharp click, the beam cut through the blackness. The tunnel was empty. No figures. No movement. Just the steady drip of water from the ceiling and the oppressive weight of silence. And then, a hand slammed against the windshield. Anton screamed. The beam of his flashlight trembled as he directed it forward. The hand slid downward, leaving a streak of something dark, something thick and red. Blood. His chest heaved. He gritted his teeth and reached for the door handle. He had to get out. He had to. A whisper inches from his ear. Don't. Anton spun around. The cab was empty. But the reflection in the windshield told a different story. Something sat in the passenger seat, its face obscured by a curtain of tangled, wet hair. Its mouth stretched into a grin too wide for any human. And its eyes, black pits of hunger, locked onto his. Anton never even had the chance to scream before the darkness took him. The world was void. Anton's senses returned slowly, like surfacing from a deep, suffocating abyss. He was no longer in his truck. The last thing he remembered was the thing in the passenger seat, its impossible grin, those hollow eyes, before the world had been swallowed by darkness. Now he lay sprawled on something cold and wet. A distant, rhythmic dripping echoed through the air. He struggled to sit up, his fingers pressing into what felt like rough stone. A tunnel. But not the one he had entered. His breath came in shallow gasps. The air was thick, damp, and heavy with an iron-like scent. Blood. He reached for his flashlight, but it was gone. The only light came from a faint, eerie glow pulsing further down the tunnel. His instincts screamed at him to stay still, but something else, a whisper at the edge of his mind, urged him forward. Anton. The voice slithered through the air, wrapping around him like unseen tendrils. It wasn't coming from one direction, it was everywhere. Who's there? He croaked, his voice barely a whisper. No answer. But the shadows at the tunnel's edge shifted. Slowly, Anton forced himself to stand. His legs were weak, his clothes damp with something he didn't dare identify. The tunnel stretched endlessly ahead, its walls carved from ancient stone, slick with moisture. And then he saw them. Figures stood motionless in the distance, their bodies barely distinguishable in the dim glow. Their heads twitched unnaturally, their arms hanging limply at their sides. Anton took a step back. The figures didn't move. Another whisper. "Join us." The figures lurched forward, their movements jerky, disjointed, like puppets on broken strings. Anton turned and ran. His breath came in ragged bursts, his heartbeat a thunderous roar in his ears. The tunnel twisted and curved, the glow growing fainter. His feet splashed through puddles of stagnant water, his mind screaming that this was impossible. This tunnel shouldn't exist. Behind him, the figures pursued, their footsteps a chaotic staccato against the stone. And beneath it all, another sound, a deep, guttural growl, something far more ancient and malevolent than the whispering voices. Something else was here. Anton didn't look back. He couldn't. If he saw it, if he truly saw what lurked in the shadows, he knew he'd never escape. Ahead, a faint glimmer of light. Another exit? Summoning every ounce of strength, he sprinted toward it. And then the ground disappeared beneath his feet. Anton's consciousness flickered like a dying ember. Time lost all meaning. His body, his very sense of self, seemed to dissolve into the darkness. The suffocating pressure of the air, the weight of unseen hands upon his chest, felt like an endless torment. The figure loomed closer, its shape blurring in the dim glow of an ethereal, flickering light that hovered above them like a distant star. Anton's breaths were shallow, his lungs struggling against the stifling grip of whatever force bound him to this place. "Don't be afraid," the figure whispered, its voice barely more than a rasp, as if the very words were dragged from a throat that had forgotten the sound of speech. Anton tried to speak, to protest, to scream, but the air thickened further, choking him with every effort. His body refused to move, his limbs stiffened as though they had turned to stone. The figure's skeletal fingers traced the outline of his face. Anton could feel the cold touch seep beneath his skin, sending a shiver of fear that spread to every nerve. "You're in my world now," the figure hissed, its grin widening unnaturally. "And here we do not leave. Not unless I say so." Anton's vision swam, and the shadows around him seemed to warp and pulse. The ground under him shifted, as though the very earth was alive, undulating like a living, breathing thing. His thoughts were fragmented, drowning in a sea of whispers that crawled through his skull like insects. "Help, help me," Anton managed to choke out, his voice hoarse and weak. But the figure only tilted its head, its hollow eyes boring into Anton's soul. There was no pity in those eyes. Only the cruel inevitability of his fate. "You've already tried," it murmured. "You've already been marked. The others tried too." Anton's mind spun, grasping at the fragments of the conversation, of his own desperate thoughts. "The others?" "Yes," the figure said, almost amused. "The others who have come before you. Those who have dared to enter the tunnel number 6. They are here too, trapped like you, forgotten by the world above." Suddenly, the shadows around him shifted again, and Anton's heart skipped a beat as he saw them. Familiar faces, half-formed and writhing, their mouths opening and closing in silent screams. The figures of the lost workers, the missing drivers, all trapped in the void like him. Some were distorted, their bodies twisted into grotesque shapes. Others had no bodies at all, just floating heads, their eyes wide and empty, their mouths frozen in silent wails. Anton's stomach churned with dread. He was not alone. "They are my children now," the figure said, its voice dark and cold. "And soon you will join them. You will become one of us. One of the forgotten." Anton's pulse thundered in his ears. A surge of panic surged through him, and he finally found the strength to move, his hand trembling as he reached for the ground. He pushed himself up, stumbling, desperate to escape. The weight of the air pressing down on him seemed to resist every movement. "Stop," the figure said, its voice an eerie calm. "You can't escape. There is no exit from this place. No light. No salvation." But Anton refused to listen. The whispers around him grew louder, their promises of despair echoing in his mind. He stumbled toward the flickering light, his heart pounding in his chest. And then as he approached, the light dimmed. The ground beneath him cracked, the earth splintering in jagged veins that spread outward like a web. Anton's eyes widened in terror as the very tunnel seemed to collapse around him, the walls shifting, groaning like an ancient beast waking from a long slumber. His footing faltered. His mind screamed for him to run, but his legs gave way beneath him. Anton tumbled into the dark abyss, his body falling through the cracks in the world deeper and deeper. The last thing he heard before everything went black was the sound of a voice, faint, distant, but unmistakable. "Welcome home." Anton awoke with a violent gasp, his body jerking upright as if he had been plunged into a cold lake. But there was no water, only darkness. Thick, suffocating, and absolute. His breath came in ragged gasps, his mind struggling to piece together where he was. Where they were. The ground beneath him was soft and damp, but it wasn't the hard stone he had felt before. No, this surface was unnervingly pliable like flesh. It rippled slightly beneath his touch, sending waves of revulsion through him. Anton's hands shook as he wiped the sweat from his brow. The air smelled of decay, of rot, and something darker, something ancient. His thoughts, fragmented and disjointed, clawed at the edges of his mind. The figure. The voices. The lost workers. He had fallen. But where was he now? "Help me." The voice was faint, barely a whisper, but it froze Anton to the core. He wasn't alone. Again. His head snapped toward the source of the sound, but all he could see was a thick, oppressive fog that clung to the ground. His instincts screamed at him to run, but where? In every direction, the void stretched endlessly, a labyrinth of shadows that seemed to have no end. "Who's there?" Anton croaked, his voice hoarse, barely audible above the beating of his heart. For a long moment there was nothing. Then another voice joined the first, this one a guttural rasp. "Help us." Anton's pulse quickened. The voices were getting closer, echoing off unseen walls. But the fog, it was thickening. Cloaking his vision, making him feel as though he were being pulled deeper into the earth itself. Something moved in the distance. Just a flicker, a shadow that darted between the dim spaces. Anton's heart raced as he pushed himself to his feet, unsteady and weak. The ground seemed to shift beneath him, but there was no time to question it. The voices, his only lifeline to any semblance of sanity, were coming closer, now louder, more urgent. "Please?" A voice cried. It sounded so familiar, so desperate. Anton stumbled toward the sound, his legs weak beneath him, his every step feeling like he was dragging himself through quicksand. But as he approached the source of the voice, the shadows seemed to warp and distort, the air thickening until it was almost suffocating. And then from the fog a figure emerged. It was one of them, one of the lost workers. Its face was gaunt, its eyes hollow pits, sunken deep within its skull. But the most disturbing thing was the smile, or what remained of it. A jagged, disjointed thing that stretched far too wide for human anatomy. Its teeth, broken and blackened, gleamed in the dim light. "Anton." The voice rasped, its mouth moving but with no sound. The words seemed to crawl into Anton's mind, bypassing his ears entirely. "Who are you?" Anton whispered, fear knotting his insides. The figure didn't answer. Instead, it reached out with a trembling hand, its fingers long and twisted. Anton recoiled instinctively, but it was too late. The figure's touch was cold, its skin like ice, and as it brushed against Anton's arm, he felt a jolt of something far worse than the touch itself. A deep, gnawing emptiness spread through him, settling in his chest and gripping his heart. It wasn't just the touch that was cold, it was the absence it left behind. There was nothing left in the world but this hollow darkness. And then the figure spoke again, its voice now a chorus of voices, disembodied all around him. "Leave, before it finds you." Anton's stomach turned, his mind spinning with the realization that something worse than the lost souls of this place lurked here. Something had found him. As the figure's form began to distort, becoming an amorphous blur of faces and twisted limbs, Anton spun around, desperately looking for some way to escape. But the fog had thickened around him, enveloping him in a heavy, suffocating shroud. He could no longer see anything beyond his own breath, his panicked heartbeat. The whispers had grown louder, turning into a cacophony of wailing voices, filling the air with their mournful cries. He could hear them all, the lost, the broken, the forgotten. Their voices were joined now by something else, an inhuman sound, guttural and deep, like the growl of a beast long buried in the earth. Anton's eyes widened as a shape began to take form in the fog ahead. It was massive, towering, dark, and impossibly twisted. It was a silhouette at first, but as it stepped forward, the mist parted, revealing its true shape. It was a creature beyond comprehension. Its form was hunched, like something caught between the physical and the spiritual. Its face was a grotesque, contorted mass of flesh, half human, half something else, something far older. The creature's eyes, if they could even be called eyes, were hollow, deep pits that seemed to suck in all light, all hope. A low, rumbling growl emanated from its throat. The ground beneath Anton's feet trembled as it took a step closer, the shadows seeming to bend around it. And with that step, Anton could feel it, the weight of eternity. The hunger. The hunger that the creature carried within it, a hunger that had consumed the very souls of those lost to this place. "You are mine now," the creature said, its voice not coming from its mouth, but from the air itself, as if the darkness itself was speaking. Anton stumbled backward, his heart racing as he desperately tried to push through the fog, but it was everywhere. There was no way out. "Leave me alone." Anton screamed, his voice raw, but it was as if the very air swallowed his words. The creature took another step forward, and Anton felt the temperature drop further, a bone-chilling cold sinking into his very soul. Then, with a final, shattering scream, the creature lunged. The creature's clawed hand shot out like a bolt of lightning, its fingers long and spindly, wrapping around Anton's chest with a grip so tight, it felt as though his very ribs might snap under the pressure. The darkness around them pulsed, and Anton's breath came in ragged gasps as the creature's voice filled his mind, cold and insidious. "You cannot escape," it whispered, its words scraping against his sanity like nails on a blackboard. "None who enter this place ever leave. You are mine now, and you will be with me for eternity." Anton's pulse thundered in his ears. He struggled, his limbs trembling, but the more he fought, the tighter the creature's grip became, dragging him deeper into the shadowed void. The lost souls around him, those who had vanished into the tunnel before him, watched, their hollow eyes filled with an unreadable sorrow. "Please." Anton gasped, his throat raw with fear. He didn't understand what was happening, why the tunnel had become this grotesque prison of forgotten souls. Why had he been chosen? Why did it feel like he had been here before, in another life, another time? The creature's grip tightened, its breath hot and rancid against his face. "This is the price of curiosity," it growled. "This is the cost of venturing too deep into the forgotten." Anton's mind flashed to the stories he had heard, stories of truck drivers, of workers, of those who had vanished in the tunnel. He remembered the whispers in the towns, the warnings of the cursed place, the ones who spoke of the darkness that lurked beneath the earth. Had they all known this was coming? Had they too felt the weight of this ancient hunger? The figure in front of him shifted, its shape folding and warping into a grotesque, nightmarish form. Anton could feel it reaching into his soul, pulling at the threads of his very existence. And then, as if the universe had finally decided to grant him some form of reprieve, something changed. There was a sudden, sharp crack, a flash of light, and for a moment Anton felt himself pulled away, torn from the creature's grip, as if the very fabric of reality had ruptured around him. For an instant he was standing on solid ground. The fog had parted, and the tunnel no longer felt like an oppressive weight. He could see the world outside, the distant glow of the headlights from his truck, the distant sound of the wind. Freedom. But it was fleeting. The creature's growl echoed in the distance, like the sound of thunder rolling across an endless sky. Anton turned, looking over his shoulder, but the tunnel was collapsing, warping into a terrible maw that seemed to devour everything in its path. With one last scream, the tunnel consumed him once more, pulling him back into the dark abyss. The ground beneath him cracked wide open, and the world he had known was swallowed whole by the shadows. Epilogue. The next morning the rain had stopped, but the fog still lingered in the valley, curling around the edges of tunnel number 6. The trucks that passed through the tunnel didn't stop anymore. The tales of the missing drivers and workers had faded into urban legends, but there was still a chill in the air, an unspoken awareness among those who lived near the tunnel. The priest and the occultist, after months of investigation, had never returned. No one knew what had truly happened in the depths of tunnel number 6. Some said the tunnel was cursed, that it had been built over an ancient, forgotten burial ground. Others whispered that the tunnel was a door to something far older, a place where the boundaries between worlds had become thin. But the truth of tunnel number 6 would remain hidden forever, a secret buried deep beneath the earth, where no one would ever find it again. And as the last of the fog lifted, a single truck passed through the tunnel, its headlights cutting through the darkness. And in the rearview mirror, a figure could be seen standing in the shadows, waiting. The end. This is a work of fiction. Any resemblance to actual events, locales or persons, living or dead, is entirely coincidental.